Forge, page 128, before. 1 year ago this night, Isabelle ran away from her owner and stole me out of the Bridewell prison and rode us to freedom. The 19th of January would be her birthday ever after, she swore. Tonight, then, she was 14. When spring had come to Morristown, I made plans for us to journey north, as far away from the newspapers that carried runaway notices about a girl with a branded face. Isabelle dug in her heels like a pig being dragged to the market. She was going south, with or without me. We argued. I called her a peevish numbskull. She called me a poxy sluggard and a churlish ruffian and a lazy scoundrel, and would not speak to me for 2 weeks. I finally begged her for forgiveness and promised I'd go with her. I planned on hiding our money the night before we were to leave, and acted as if we had been robbed. I'd already arranged for a job as a cart driver for the army and was due to leave soon for Albany. With no money, she'd have to go with me. But her mind was just as treacherous as mine, only hers moved faster. She stole the money before I could and left in the middle of the night, taking the small purse of coins, her shawl, and a blanket. Instead of being afraid for her, I was angry. Instead of setting out after her, I drove that cart to Albany, vowing to keep her out of my thoughts and twisting my ear violently whenever she slipped into my mind. It never worked. Everything from that moment on had been plagued with misfortune. The truth of the matter was that I missed her fiercely, more than anything, and I wanted to wish her a happy birthday. Had she found work in Philadelphia? Did she come to her senses near Baltimore or Williamsburg? Has she been captured and returned to the Locktons? Was she alive? Forge, chapter 26. I twisted my ears so often in the weeks that followed, it swelled like a puffball. Did me no good. I still thought about Isabelle. Her face poisoned my mind the way the cold had been taking hold of my bones. Sore ear and cold bones aside, life had become more tolerable on the account of our little hut. Sleeping whilst sheltered by the walls of in the roof is vastly more comfortable than sleeping under the open sky, even if the roof leaks in spots. Though most huts in camp were completed, thousands of soldiers were unfit for duty because their clothes were falling to pieces. Those without shirts covered their form with blankets or rags when necessity forced them out to use the privy trench. Many suffered from death of their toes and fingers on account of frostbite. I cannot bring myself to describe the state of the lads who had no breeches. Because my company was mostly cloth and shod, we worked more hours than some. We fell into a regular pattern. Dawn, revel, work on the fortifications meant to protect us from attack. Breakfast, more work, dinner, chop and haul firewood, supper at dark. The middle of the day was tolerable warm, but after dawn and near the sunset, the cold ate through my clothes and gnawed at my bones. The best hours came after the sun dropped behind Mount Misery. We'd retire to our hut and cook up the day's rations of dried peas and meat, with a few cabbage leaves or even a potato when fortune smiled, and eat as slow as we could manage. We devised a rotation to take turns sitting directly in front of the fire. 2 by 2, we played checkers. Greenlaw had fashioned a checkerboard on a plank. Bits of twigs stood in for black checkers and shards of bone for white. Civilness stole extra time where it was the warmest by cooking tonics for our health, boiling butternut bark or spruce tips or moss in the kettle. These remedies required constant stirring and tasting. The tailor was near 3 times as old as us and had grown painfully thin, so there was little protest about his unlawful hearth-sitting. Aaron Barry did once whine about Civilness's habit. Greenlaw lost his temper and offered to remove all of Aaron's teeth with his fist, which caused Aaron to crawl up into his own bunk, gnawing at his toothstick like a discontented beaver. When we were not the appointed checkered players, Eben and I worked on our wood carvings. My bird was slowly transforming from the beaked pig into a sheep, carrying a knapsack. Eben was much better than I. He could carve the likeness of a horse in 2 nights' work. He was never satisfied, though. He always threw each one into the fire. The hut filled with boasting, conversating, wagering, and wild tales every night. We'd itch the vermin feasting on our flesh, and we'd share the many days' rumors. The king had declared peace. No, the king was sending German and Russian mercenaries to destroy us. A ball of fire as big as a man's head fell from heaven to Hartborough, a good omen. But there'd been an earthquake near York just as a cat gave birth to puppies, which meant the worst. Congress was fleeing to Spain. No, Congress was coming to Valley Forge. Smallpox was killing thousands of soldiers. Nay, the variolation against smallpox had killed them. Birds flew backwards over Philadelphia. A talking cow had been displayed in Georgia. And always the wild tales that more food, better food, and blankets and clothing were on the way, and we would soon be paid for the first time in months. That made us laugh. Sooner or later, someone would throw a pebble or a twig at Benny and beg him for a story. The lad had read every book ever printed, it seems, and happily recounted for us the ancient tales of evil kings, queens, or beautiful queens, quarreling gods, and monsters and heroes. At the start of February, we enjoyed clear skies and warm days that melted most of the snow that thawed my finger bones some. Captain Russell armed us with shovels, axes, and hatchets, ordering us to strengthen our outer line fortifications. 1,000 of us dug trenches deep enough for a man to stand up to his neck. We wove an abatis, a giant tangle of a fence with a long, sharp-tipped poles that could gut any British horse that tried to leap the barricades. I made a point to be friendly with a few of the black soldiers I met at fortifications duty, a fellow named Salem from Massachusetts, Sadrick from Virginia, and Windsor from Rhode Island. The vast encampment was home to hundreds of fellows like us, mostly free though. Some had been enlisted by their masters. We complained about the food and the water and everything else under the sun the way that the soldiers did, but we were able to do it in full companionship without worrying about lack brains like John Burns. It was an uncommon sensation, almost and most pleasant. I asked them to keep watch for out for Isabelle, a girl with a scarred face and an irritating manner, after the war, and to show her kindness if they ever met her. One day it became so warm while we worked on the abatis that we all stripped off our coats and wiped the sweat from our faces. Some lads from Gloucester made a game of hitting rocks with stout sticks, but the officers put a stop to the sport before it caused us to forget our duties. Once they were gone, the game started up again. We took care to post sentry guards and took turns to batting at the Sphere. My company scored the greatest number of hits and claimed the top prize, a freshly killed opossum. We hurried back to the hut to cook it, arms sore and ravenous. The provision wagons from Maryland and New Jersey had arrived near empty that week, and the whole camp had been on half rations because of it. Possum tastes better than you might think.